throughout our conversation, we've gotten a pretty good idea of the amount of activity you do, the different activities you do throughout the day, what work looks like, what your diet looks like. But I think it'd be interesting to take us through a typical day. When you get up, what you do, what you eat, what your eating window looks like. Can you take me through what that is?
Yeah, it's evolved over time, but I go to sleep at about 8 p.m., which sounds really early until you realize that the sun goes down here at 6 p.m. year round because we're at the equator. So the days never really vary much. Slightly, but not much. Sun comes up at about 5:15. So I usually get up with the sunrise. And I'm usually in the ocean before 6 a.m. surfing. Before I surf, I have a glass of raw milk and honey, maybe a coconut for water, like a real coconut. Surf for a couple hours, come back, eat breakfast. Breakfast is usually fresh squeezed orange juice, local fruit, grass-fed meat, steak or burger, cheese, raw milk, maybe some liver. And then, depending what time of the morning it is, I settle in, do a little stretching after surfing, sit down to do some work for a few hours. I try to block my work into like 2 deep work sessions of 2 or 3 hours. Usually I get like 2-hour blocks a day of deep work, creative work, whether it's podcasting with you or someone else, a podcast for my podcast, research for a podcast. After the first deep work session, I'll usually eat again, maybe a smaller meal, a little bit of meat, cheese, fruit, coconut type of thing. And then maybe another deep work session, maybe not, maybe an afternoon workout. My friend Ben Patrick was just here, knees over toes guy. So I do a lot of his stuff for workouts. Not a whole lot of weightlifting, but it's a lot of mobility training. I sit too much, so I'm always trying to unlock my hips. I'm interested in the strength of my posterior deltoids, so trying to make my posterior shoulders really strong for surfing. My tibialis muscles, my calves, these kind of things. I have a gym at my house, but I mostly end up doing body weight mobility stuff. In the afternoon, I'll often either go out for another surf or skate with my friends, maybe put up a slack line somewhere, and then come home 5:30 dinner. I usually eat dinner by the time it gets dark here around 6. Dinner is usually more grass-fed meat, raw dairy, honey, fruit, organs. And I try and mix it up, but I'm one of these people that finds routine comforting. I don't really need to change my food. If I've got good ground beef and I've got good fruit, I'll just eat that consistently. I don't have to eat crazy steaks or lots of different things. I don't use many spices on my food. In fact, I don't use any spices other than just low microplastic sea salt. So yeah, the variety in my diet comes with like seasonal fruit here. Whatever's in season, I'll eat that. Like now, like I said, rambutan, mangosteen, pineapple, mango. It's coming into season. So yeah, it's meat, it's organs, it's fruit juice, raw dairy, honey. That's kind of what I eat. And I eat it throughout the day. So the eating window is it's pretty much the whole day. I used to intermittent fast. I don't do that anymore. I'll eat when I get up at 6, 5:30 in the morning. Eat my last meal at 6:30 sometimes. So yeah, it could be a 12-hour eating window or more in the day. And I think that that's fine. I don't really worry about that anymore. That's a whole separate conversation.
Well, hearing you talk about what you eat and the meat you're eating, it sounds like at least the majority of it is beef. I'm curious the diversity within that meat category. How much of it is beef? How much of it is ground beef? This ties back to what we talked about before. You're a big fan of getting quality animal products. Are you having chicken, pork? And obviously it's going to be dependent on where you're living and what you have access to. So talk about the meat piece and what the diversity looks like.
I haven't found any good chicken or pork in Costa Rica, so I just eat beef. There's a great butcher here in town that is grass-fed, grass-finished, uses no pesticides on their land. I was just talking to a friend about getting one of his cattle, a 1.5-year-old cow that's been on their land, fed only grass, no pesticides the whole life. So probably will eat that meat. Most of what I eat is ground beef. I I really like ground beef, and I think it's affordable and it's not, you don't have to do anything crazy. When I do steak, I like skirt steak or flat iron or hanger steak. If I can get a good ribeye, I'll eat it, but that's not the majority of my meals. I don't eat a lot of eggs, though I think eggs are great for humans because I just haven't found the right people to do it. On my land, I want to start growing chickens, and maybe I'll eat the chickens eventually, and maybe I'll eat their eggs if I can just keep them safe from predators. We'll see, and just get them to eat bugs, crickets, and worms and things like that. That would be an interesting piece of content to show what their eggs look like. So I don't eat much fish. I think that fish in general is problematic for humans in 2023 because of the heavy metals, the microplastics, PFAs, so perfluoroalkyl substances, the same kind of things that are in these Lululemon leggings are also in your fish. Endocrine disruptors, forever chemicals are synonyms for that class of chemicals. I don't think it's a big deal if people want to eat fish every once in a while, but if you make fish the majority of your diet, I think it would be prudent to check your heavy metals because fish is a real problem when it comes to that stuff. It's just not great for humans, and it's just polluted. So I don't eat a lot of fish anymore, but I think it's reasonable on an animal-based diet. Same with chicken and pork. I just haven't found a good enough source, and I found pretty good sources of beef. And I get raw milk locally and farmers markets, again, community, talking to the farmers, organic produce there is great.
You mentioned ground beef being a big part of the diet. How do you keep that interesting? How do you cook that?
Man, I think that if the ground beef has enough fat, you won't get bored of it. But if the ground beef is too lean, your body will get bored of it. And I don't think I'm programmed as differently from other people as those listening may believe. For many people, when they think about eating a lot of meat, especially a lot of red meat, their first concern is, I'm going to get so bored. But more often than not, I hear people surprised at how satisfying it is and how often they look forward to the next meal. As long as that meat has a reasonable amount of fat. So when I'm getting ground beef, I'm getting 80-20, at least 85-15, never 90-10. And if I need to make it more interesting, I'll just add some butter. I think meat gets boring when it's just protein. If you have some fat in there, it's juicy, it's rewarding, and your body's going to love it. It's just people are eating meat that's too lean, and then it feels boring. So if you get fat in your meat, it's going to be fine most of the time. If you're really a foodie and you're using food as entertainment, that's great. Food is amazing. And oftentimes that can be an impediment to really optimizing your health. So I like ground beef because it's easy, it tastes good. One of the downsides to living in Costa Rica is we don't have Angus cattle here or Wagyu. They don't do well in the heat. We have a mixture of Brahman and Angus, or I think it's Nelore cattle, and they're not as good. So the ribeyes I've had here are very hit and miss. Every once in a while I get a good ribeye, but the skirt steak is fine. But the ground beef is just, hey, if you've got kind of tough meat, just make ground beef out of it. I'm a simple man. I'll make bone broth also. I forgot about that. I've actually got some oxtail in the crock pot, Instant Pot right now that I'm going to use for collagen. So yeah, I don't think ground beef is problematic. If people want to do different steaks, that's fine. And if you need variety, chicken, pork, fish, fine, great. Just think about the pros and cons of each piece of that. And yeah, I would say the piece that people are probably not thinking about with regard to boredom is the fat content of the meat. People want to trim the fat off, and that doesn't make exciting meat.
So you mentioned even adding butter into the ground beef. Will you ever add other things like tallow or coconut oil?
You could add tallow if you wanted to. I don't add coconut oil. I generally don't use coconut oil for anything anymore. But you could. Sometimes you could put a little cheese. I think people will intuitively understand that like a cheeseburger is more interesting than a hamburger. That's probably because of, well, the dairy is interesting and the fat from the cheese is good too. So I suppose if you wanted to, you could put some cheese in your burger if it's too lean or something and then grill it. I also have a really nice grill here in Costa Rica that I brought from the United States. And so it makes the meat pretty good.
I'm really honing in on this ground beef piece because I do tend to enjoy ground beef as well. And I'm trying to think of different ways I can diversify and enjoy it in a different realm. I love burgers. But do you find a lot of the time you're just like cooking it up in a pan and then putting it on a plate and eating it with a fork and keeping it really simple? Or is it mostly burgers? I just really want your ideas as somebody that really eats a lot of that.
I cook it on a grill. I don't cook in the pan ever. So the grill, I think, helps. And, I will eat it I usually have a glass of milk with it, or I'll have a glass of orange juice with it, or I'll have some fruit with it. But I'm pretty simple. It's usually fruit and meat, some kind of orange juice, milk. And I think, how lean is your ground beef?
To be honest, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Now that I know the percentages, I'm going to be more keen on observing that and looking for the fattier meat. And
I think there's a lot of, I don't know how much regulation there is around saying something is 80-20 and then actually really having it be 80-20. The leaner meats are actually usually more expensive. So I don't know why they would mislabel an 80-20, but a lot of times when I go to the US, I will get ground beef and it says it's 80-20. And I think this is not even close. 80-20 is pretty fatty ground beef. You'll know it. And I've had ground beef in the United States that's even more fatty than that. It's probably 25 or 30% fat, and that's really good. So 70-30. And if you're getting meat from a butcher and they can grind some extra fat in there for you, it'll be really good. I had this ground beef in the States, I think it was from Panorama Farms, and it had, I think it was 26 or 28 grams of fat per serving, which sounds like a lot if you think fat is bad for you. It sounds like a lot if you think fat is good for you, but it was delicious. Most ground beef per serving is 17 to 18 grams, and I think the serving sizes on the back of a ground beef package, I'd have to guess it's either 4 or 6 ounces. So I'm not sure exactly how much is in there, but you definitely want more fat in your ground beef. It'll taste so much better. And obviously, I believe that animal fat is good for humans. Vitamin E, vitamin K2, so many other good fat-soluble nutrients, stearic acid. So don't fear the animal fat. It just tastes better.
A lot of fatty burgers then.
Yeah, fatty burgers, or adding cheese to your burger or raw cheese to your burger. You know what I've had also that's really good is raw cream. I know raw milk is illegal in Canada, unfortunately. That's probably the number one reason you should move. But if you have raw cream and you add raw cream to your burger, I don't know how you could get bored of that. You can also take an egg yolk if you have good eggs and you want to crack a raw egg yolk, not the white, but just a raw egg yolk on your burger. That makes it interesting too. I've done that. Raw cream cheese on a burger is great. So adding the fat onto the burger, different flavors, that's really good. Honey. So one of the best things is just butter and honey, or sour cream and honey, yogurt and honey, yogurt and egg yolk, like all like the creamy, fatty things on the burger, you're set.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
The carnivore community hates me. The ketogenic community hates me. The vegans don't like what I'm saying. You can give someone a diet of pure white sugar and rice, and their diabetes gets better. You get significantly less benefits from working out.